tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Buddhadhamma Ch namasa. So we'll starting off with our theme of happiness, chapter 11 in Buddhadhamma, and it's also, there's a lot of sutta references and suggested suttas in all of these chapters, so when there is a sutta reference that seems interesting, we'll just be going to the suttas and reading suttas. And so I'm just going to read a short few paragraphs from Buddhadhamma to start out, and then we'll go into a sutta, and most of this reading will be from a sutta. This is a few pages into chapter 11. It's page 821, the chapter in happiness in Buddhadhamma. Section A. Happiness is reached by happiness. It is often overlooked that Buddhism is a religion of happiness. If one encounters such teachings as life is suffering or all is suffering, one may think that Buddhism is permeated by suffering. When people see that the Four Noble Truths begin with dukkha, suffering, or they encounter the Buddha's statement in relation to the Four Noble Truths, both in the past and in the present, I teach only suffering and the end of suffering, some people may be convinced that Buddhism is a religion pervaded by suffering. People need to be constantly reminded that the Buddha accompanied the teaching of the Four Noble Truths with the four duties, the kichas. If one performs these duties incorrectly, then one trips up from the very start. One will not be able to reach the heart of Buddhism. Especially in regard to the first noble truth, one needs to be as accurate as possible. If it helps, one can memorize the Pali phrase, Dukkham Ariya Satcham Parinyayam. The noble truth of suffering should be thoroughly understood. Our responsibility in the face of suffering is comprehensive understanding. Suffering is to be thoroughly understood. Suffering is a matter to be taken up and addressed by wisdom. It is not something to be accumulated in order to torment the heart. If one experiences suffering, use wisdom to deal with it and bring it to an end. This is the beginning of the correct path of practice. One can look at the life of the Buddha. Before he was awakened, he practiced severe austerities and extreme asceticism, which was the custom of renunciates at that time. When he realized that this is a wrong form of practice, he abandoned these austerities and turned to the middle way of practice, the Majjhima Patipada, until he reached awakening. This is a brief summary of events. A close examination of this account from the Tipitaka provides a clearer understanding of Buddhism on the whole. In the Bodhi Raja Kumara Sutta, the Buddha recounts how before his enlightenment he had this thought: happiness cannot be reached by way of happiness. It can only be reached by way of pain. It was for this reason that he went forth into the renunciate way of life. He then went to live with two meditation masters at their hermitages. Afterward, he undertook extreme ascetic practices with intensity and ardor, experiencing extreme physical pain, all in vain. He realized that it is not possible to reach the supreme good by way of self-mortification. Note here his words: the way to awakening must be otherwise. He remembered an event from his childhood when he was sitting quietly alone in the shade of a rose apple tree, or in the shade of a jambalan tree, and had attained the first jhana, distinguished by bliss and joy. He had the insight that this is the path, as confirmed by the words he spoke to himself. Here indeed is the path to awakening. When he was clear in his mind about this issue, he asked himself whether he is afraid of this happiness, free from sensual pleasure and free from unwholesome states. This was a way of verifying whether this happiness contains any danger. He answered with confidence that he was without fear. He consequently abandoned the extreme ascetic practices, followed the path of happiness, which is represented by the term middle way, and finally reached awakening. An important distinction is that many of the religious traditions in India at that time claimed that happiness cannot be reached by way of happiness. It can only be reached by way of pain. Adherents of these traditions thus undertook extreme ascetic practices, tapas. In Buddhism, however, teaches that happiness can be reached by way of happiness, and thus encourages practitioners to abandon extreme ascetic practices, which are classified as self-mortification and considered a waste of time. The most basic form of happiness is derived by coming into contact with external objects and is dependent on material things, and is thus referred to as sense pleasure, kama sukha. When one has developed and accessed a higher form of happiness, this superior happiness exists in tandem with sense pleasure. Alternatively, one may choose to abandon sense pleasure altogether and only abide in a more refined kind of happiness. These superior forms of happiness prevent the dangers of a dependence on material things. Indeed, they provide a greater degree of independence. One is able to experience happiness without needing to consume things. Note the phrase by the Buddha above, happiness free from sensual pleasure and free from unwholesome states. One progresses in unison with wholesome desire, chanda. A vital factor in this correct practice for promoting independence is wisdom. With wisdom, even if the refined forms of happiness are sustained over a long period of time, they do not overwhelm the mind. One is not intoxicated. One does not forget oneself. True happiness goes hand in hand with freedom, and conversely, true freedom is endowed with happiness. One reason why the birth of Buddhism was so revolutionary, allegedly causing an earthquake and excitement all the way up to the highest Brahma realms, is because it introduced this new perspective and way of life, that happiness can be reached by happiness. The goal of Buddhism, supreme happiness, paramasukha, is accompanied by wisdom, which frees the mind through understanding. This is genuine, independent, and secure happiness. It need not be searched for, and it is free from a reliance on external things. It remains constant. Wherever one is bright, joyous, and happy. All of us who are aware of this principle of supreme happiness have the opportunity to develop ourselves in order to realize it. And so now I'll read the Bodhi Raja Kumara Sutta, which Prabhu Yuto alluded to there in the reading. And there's a couple sections in this sutta which repeat previous suttas, so I'm going to jump back to those suttas just so this sutta is more complete. This is the Bodhi Raja Kumara Sutta to Prince Bodhi. It's Majjhima Nikaya 85, page 704. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Bhaga country at Susamaragira in the Besakala Grove, the Deer Park. Now on that occasion, a palace named Kokanada had recently been built for Prince Bodhi, and it had not yet been inhabited by any recluse or Brahmin or any human being at all. Then Prince Bodhi addressed the Brahmin student, Sanjika thus, "Come, my dear Sanjika go to the Blessed One and pay homage in my name with your head at his feet, and ask whether he is free from illness and affliction, and is healthy, strong, and abiding in comfort, saying, Venerable Sir, Prince Bodhi pays homage with his head at the Blessed One's feet, and he asks whether the Blessed One is free from illness and abiding in comfort. Then say this, Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One, together with the Sangha of Bhikkhus, consent to accept tomorrow's meal from Prince Bodhi." "Yes, sir," Sanjika replied, and he went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down on one side and said, "Master Gotama, Prince Bodhi pays homage with his head at Master Gotama's feet and asks whether he is free from illness and abiding in comfort. And he says this, let Master Gotama, together with the Sangha of Bhikkhus, consent to accept tomorrow's meal from Prince Bodhi." The Blessed One consented in silence. Then, knowing that the Blessed One had consented, Sanjika rose from his seat, went to Prince Bodhi, and told him what had happened, adding, "The recluse Gotama has consented." Then, when the night had ended, Prince Bodhi had good food of various kinds prepared in his own residence, and he had the Kokonada palace spread with white cloth down to the last step of the staircase. Then he addressed the Brahmin student Sanjika-Putta thus, "Come, my dear Sanjika-Putta, go to the Blessed One and announce that it is time thus. It is time, Venerable Sir, the meal is ready." "Yes, sir," Sanjika-Putta replied, and he went to the Blessed One and announced that it was time thus. "It is time, Master Gotama, the meal is ready." Then, it being morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went to Prince Bodhi's residence. Now on that occasion, Prince Bodhi was standing in the outer porch, waiting for the Blessed One. When he saw the Blessed One coming in the distance, he went out to meet him and paid homage to him, and then, allowing the Blessed One to precede him, he proceeded to the Kokonada palace. But the Blessed One stopped at the lowest step of the staircase. Prince Bodhi said to him, "Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One step on the cloth, let the Sublime One step on the cloth, that it may lead to my welfare and happiness for a long time." When this was said, the Blessed One was silent. A second time, a third time, Prince Bodhi said to him, "Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One step on the cloth, let the Sublime One step on the cloth, that it may lead to my welfare and happiness for a long time." The Blessed One looked at the Venerable Ananda. The Venerable Ananda said to Prince Bodhi, "Prince, let the cloth be removed. The Blessed One will not step on a strip of cloth. The Tathagata has regard for future generations." There's a note there. The commentary explains that Venerable Ananda said this with the thought in mind. In later times, people will come to regard honor to the bhikkhus as a way of ensuring the fulfillment of their mundane wishes, and will lose faith in the Sangha if their displays of honor do not bring the success they desire. So Prince Bodhi had the cloth removed, and he had seats prepared in the upper apartments of the Kokonada palace. The Blessed One and the Sangha of bhikkhus ascended the Kokonada palace and sat down on the seats that had been prepared. Then, with his own hands, Prince Bodhi served and satisfied the Sangha of bhikkhus, headed by the Buddha, with the various kinds of good food. When the Blessed One had eaten and had withdrawn his hand from the bowl, Prince Bodhi took a low seat, sat down on one side, and said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, we have thought thus. Pleasure is not to be gained through pleasure. Pleasure is to be gained through pain. Prince, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too thought thus. Pleasure is not to be gained through pleasure. Pleasure is to be gained through pain. Later, Prince, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessing of youth and in the prime of life," and it goes through the story of the Buddha deciding to do self-mortification. "And I sat down there thinking, this will serve for striving. Now 3 similes occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying in the water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood and it is lying in water. Eventually the man would reap weariness and disappointment. So too, as to those recluses and Brahmins who still do not live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, They are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the first simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Again, a second simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? No, Master Gautama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, even though it is lying on dry land, far from water. Eventually the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the second simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Again, a third simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by rubbing it against the dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? Yes, Master Gautama. Why so? Because it is a dry, sapless piece of wood and is lying on dry land, far from water. So too, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if they do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. These are the three similes that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. And it goes eventually through the four jhanas and his attainment of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. This was the third true knowledge attained by me in the third watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. Then he goes on, I considered the Dhamma that I have attained is profound, hard to see and hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in worldliness, takes delight in worldliness, rejoices in worldliness. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely, specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it is hard to see this truth, namely, the stilling of all formations, the relinquishing of all attachments, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. If I were to teach the Dhamma, others would not understand me, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. Thereupon there came to me spontaneously these stanzas never heard before. Enough with teaching the Dhamma that even I found hard to reach, for it will never be perceived by those who live in lust and hate. Those dyed in lust, wrapped in darkness, will never discern this abstruse Dhamma, which goes against the worldly stream, subtle, deep, and difficult to see, considering thus my mind inclined to inaction rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Then Bhikkhus, the Brahma Sahampati, knew with his mind the thought in my mind, and he considered, The world will be lost, the world will perish, since the mind of the Tathagata, accomplished and fully enlightened, inclines to inaction rather than to teaching the Dhamma. Then, just as quickly as a strong man might flex his extended arm or extend his flexed arm, the Brahma Sahampati vanished in the Brahma world and appeared before me. He arranged his upper robe on one shoulder and, extending his hands in reverential salutation toward me, said, "Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. Let the Sublime One teach the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are wasting through not hearing the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand the Dhamma." The Brahma Sahampati spoke thus, and then he said further, "In Magadha there have appeared till now impure teachings devised by those still stained. Open the doors to the deathless. Let them hear the Dhamma that the stainless one has found. Just as one who stands on a mountain peak can see below the people all around, so, O wise one, all-seeing sage, ascend the palace of the Dhamma. Let the sorrowless one survey this human breed, engulfed in sorrow, overcome by birth and old age. Arise, victorious hero, caravan leader, debtless one, and wander in the world. Let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand." Then I listened to the Brahma's pleading, and out of compassion for beings, I surveyed the world with the eye of a Buddha. Surveying the world with the eye of a Buddha, I saw beings with little dust in their eyes and with much dust in their eyes, with keen faculties and with dull faculties, with good qualities and with bad qualities, easy to teach and hard to teach, and some who dwelt seeing fear and blame, and in the other world. Just as in a pond of blue or red or white lotuses, some lotuses that are born and grow in the water thrive immersed in the water without rising out of it, and some other lotuses that are born and grow in the water rest on the water's surface, and some other lotuses that are born and grow in the water rise out of the water and stand clear, unwetted by it. So too, surveying the world with the eye of a Buddha, I saw beings with little dust in their eyes and with much dust in their eyes, with keen faculties and with dull faculties, with good qualities and with bad qualities, easy to teach and hard to teach, and some who dwelt seeing fear and blame and in the other world. Then I replied to the Brahma Sahampati in stanzas. Open for them are the doors to the deathless. Let those with ears now show their faith, thinking it would be troublesome, O Brahma. I did not speak the Dhamma, subtle and sublime. Then the Brahma Sahampati thought, I have created the opportunity for the Blessed One to teach the Dhamma, and after paying homage to me, kept me on the right. He therefore departed at once. This goes into the story that I won't read of going to the deer park and teaching the first 5 disciples. I was able to convince the bhikkhus of the group of 5. Then I sometimes instructed 2 bhikkhus while the other 3 went for alms, and the 6 of us lived on what those 3 bhikkhus brought back from their alms round. Sometimes I instructed 3 bhikkhus while the other 2 went for alms, and the 6 of us lived on what those 2 bhikkhus brought back from their alms round. Then the bhikkhus of the group of 5, not long after being thus taught and instructed by me, by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge here and now, entered upon and abided in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. When this was said, Prince Bodhi said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, when a bhikkhu finds the Tathagata to discipline him, how long is it until by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, he here and now enters upon and abides in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness? As to that, Prince, I shall ask you a question in return. Answer it as you choose. What do you think, Prince? Are you skilled in the art of wielding a goad while riding an elephant? Yes, Venerable Sir, I am. What do you think, Prince? Suppose a man came here thinking, Prince Bodhi knows the art of wielding a goad while riding an elephant. I shall train in that art under him. If he had no faith, he could not achieve what can be achieved by one who has faith. If he had much illness, he could not achieve what can be achieved by one who is free from illness. If he was fraudulent and deceitful, he could not achieve what can be achieved by one who is honest and sincere. If he was lazy, he could not achieve what could be achieved by one who is energetic. If he was not wise, he could not achieve what can be achieved by one who is wise. What do you think, Prince? Could that man train under you in the art of wielding a goad while riding an elephant? Venerable Sir, even if he had one of those deficiencies, he could not train under me. So what of the 5? What do you think, Prince? Suppose a man came here thinking, Prince Bodhi knows the art of wielding a goad while riding an elephant. I shall train in that art under him. If he had faith, he could achieve what could be achieved by one who has faith. If he was free from illness, he could achieve what can be achieved by one who is free from illness. If he was honest and sincere, he could achieve what can be achieved by one who is honest and sincere. If he was energetic, he could achieve what can be achieved by one who is energetic. If he was wise, he could achieve what can be achieved by one who is wise. What do you think, Prince? Could that man train under you in the art of wielding a goad while riding an elephant? Venerable Sir, even if he had one of those qualities, he could train under me. So what of the 5? So too, Prince, there are these 5 factors of striving. What 5? Here a bhikkhu has faith. He places his faith in the Tathagata's enlightenment thus. That Blessed One is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. Then he is free from illness and affliction, possessing a good digestion that is neither too cool nor too warm, but medium and able to bear the strain of striving. Then he is honest and sincere, and shows himself as he actually is to the teacher and his companions in the holy life. Then he is energetic in abandoning unwholesome states and in undertaking wholesome states, steadfast, launching his effort with firmness and persevering in cultivating wholesome states. Then he is wise. He possesses wisdom regarding rise and disappearance that is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction of suffering. These are the 5 factors of striving. Prince, when a bhikkhu who possesses these 5 factors of striving finds a Tathagata to discipline him, he might dwell 7 years by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, here and now enters upon and abides in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. Let alone 7 years, Prince, when a bhikkhu who possesses these 5 factors of striving finds a Tathagata to discipline him, he might dwell 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, let alone 1 year, Prince. He might dwell 7 months, 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, half a month, let alone half a month, Prince. He might dwell 7 days and nights, 6 days and nights, 5 days and nights, 4 days and nights, 3 days and nights, 2 days and nights, 1 day and night, let alone 1 day and night, Prince. When a bhikkhu who possesses these 5 factors of striving finds a Tathagata to discipline him, then being instructed in the evening, he might arrive at distinction in the morning. Being instructed in the morning, he might arrive at distinction in the evening. When this was said, Prince Bodhi said to the Blessed One, "Oh, the Buddha! Oh, the Dhamma! Oh, how well proclaimed is the Dhamma! For one instructed in the evening might arrive at distinction in the morning, and one instructed in the morning might arrive at distinction in the evening." When this was said, the Brahmin student Sanjika said to Prince Bodhi, "Master Bodhi says, oh, the Buddha, oh, the Dhamma, oh, how well proclaimed is the Dhamma. But he does not say, I go to Master Gotama for refuge into the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Do not say that, my dear Sanjika do not say that. I heard and learned this from my mother's lips. There was an occasion when the Blessed One was living at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Then my mother, who was pregnant, went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, she sat down on one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, the prince or princess in my womb, whichever it may be, goes to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Let the Blessed One remember the child as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. There was also an occasion when the Blessed One was living here in the country of the Bhagas at Sumaragira in the Besekala Grove, the Deer Park. Then my nurse, carrying me on her hip, went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, she stood at one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, this Prince Bodhi goes to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Let the Blessed One remember him as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. Now, my dear Sanjika for the third time, I go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Let the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. Reading there for today. Questions or comments for Poor, for myself, for Ajahn Nyaniko? I like some of the imagery in that sutta where he's going for the meal invitation, and Prince Bodhi asks the Buddha to step on the white cloth, and after he asks him 3 times, you get this really beautiful image of the Buddha doesn't say anything, but he just sort of looks at Ananda. He's just like, Ananda, come on, like,
explain it.
Like, explain you. I'm not even gonna say anything to this guy.
I actually get that as a cultural thing, if I can enlighten on, like, is that something that was done in India? It doesn't mean anything to me.
There was a footnote before the one
I didn't
read that explains.
There was a footnote kind of about just that it was about the like holy people stepping on things or touching things or blessing, like blessed objects that would help you attain your worldly or material wishes, success. The Buddha was
also like having children.
having
Children.
children.
Oh,
Like
you would have kids if that happened or something?
yeah.
Yeah, like if they make a determination beforehand, if he steps on the cloth, this.
Or if this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, or I'm going to be successful in this financial
It
endeavor.
would forcing an auspicious sign, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there might have been in a previous footnote that said something like that the prince and his wife or something were unable to have a child, and so
Could be.
I might be wrong on that, but it was the child thing that.
That rings a bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prince Bodhi was childless and desired a son. He had heard that people can fulfill their wishes by making special offerings to the Buddha, so he spread the white cloth with the idea, if I am to have a son, the Buddha will step on the cloth. If I am not to have a son, he will not step on the cloth. The Buddha knew that by reason of past evil karma, he and his wife were destined to remain childless. Hence he did not step on the cloth. Later he laid down a disciplinary rule, prohibiting the bhikkhus from stepping on a white cloth, but subsequently modified the rule to allow bhikkhus to step on a cloth as a blessing for householders.
Depending on whether or not we can have knowledge and visions of other people's future. I'm inclined not to step on cloth.
So actually it worked. He didn't step on it.
You're being truthful. Maybe it